Let me ask you a simple question. If I punch you in the face and the onlookers around you don't notice, I choose to ignore it, then I punch you again, and you finally punch me back, do I have a right to complain? A sane, fair-minded, and fair person would say no. And yet, that is precisely the world we live in today. We live in a world that watched one group of people carry out what many legal scholars, United Nations, and human rights organizations have described as a genocide. For over 2.5 years, while the global media largely looked away, by March 2025, the Gaza Health Ministry published a 1516 pages document listing the verified names of over 50,000 Palestinians killed. And the first 350 pages of that document, entirely children under the age of 16. 1 in every 50 people in Gaza has been killed. 168,000 others have been wounded, and the UN estimates more than a quarter of them will have permanent injuries. But the moment other side responds or retaliates, suddenly the whole world wakes up. The cameras turned on, the press conferences begin, and somehow the second group, the one that was being bombed, becomes the villain. These are the double standards of the world we live in, sadly. Why is it so? The answer lies in a 1968 treaty called the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, or the NPT. The treaty essentially defines legal nuclear powers as those countries that had already built and tested a nuclear device before January 1st, 1967. If you had the bomb before the date, that is kosher, you are a recognized nuclear power. If you didn't, you are not allowed to have one. The 5 recognized states are US, Russia, UK, France, and China. Many dissidents, most prominently India, openly argues that the NPT creates a club of nuclear haves and a larger group of nuclear have-nots, and that the treaty never explains on what ethical grounds a 1967 cutoff date is a valid basis for deciding who gets weapons of mass destruction. Meanwhile, Israel, the close ally of the United States, is believed to possess between 80 to 400 nuclear warheads. And they have never signed the NPT and follows a policy of deliberate nuclear ambiguity. The West, as always, is completely silent, no sanctions and no threats to the Israel. On the contrary, Iran, an NPT signatory, begins enriching uranium and faces crippling international sanctions. North Korea withdraws from the NPT in 2003 and develops weapons and gets isolation and military threats. If you are a Western ally with undeclared nukes, that's fine, they will turn a blind eye. If you are an independent nation, that's a crime, however. We call it DSW, the double standards of the West. Now, the comparatively more important and more interesting double standard is the freedom paradox. The narrative goes on like this. There is no denying that freedom is the absolute necessity, but the West decides that freedom actually is what it is and what it entails. If you have freedom like us in the West, you are really free. But if you don't agree with our definition of freedom, we will bomb the hell out of you and forcefully break you so you can have no option left except to be free. Let's look at the record. Vietnam, the US dropped more bombs than were used in all of World War II. An estimated 2 to 3 million Vietnamese civilians died. The country was chemically poisoned by Agent Orange for generations. The outcome? A unified communist state, exactly what the West was trying to prevent. Afghanistan, 20 years and trillions of dollars later. Brown's University's costs of war project estimates over 940,000 people were killed by direct war violence across post 9/11 conflicts, with more than 432,000 civilians. The Taliban returned to power in the same week as the US withdrew their forces. What a miserable outcome. Come to Iraq, invaded on the claim of WMDs, the infamous WMDs that were never found. Madeleine Albright, who was one of the most prominent American officials of that time, she openly admitted, brazenly admitted, I would say, that US is complicit in killing of 500,000 Iraqis. Overall, 7.8 million people were displaced. The war created the very extremism it claimed to be fighting. Libya, NATO-backed forces overthrew Gaddafi in 2011. Today, Libya has two rival governments, and actively there is an chaos erupting from that time that has destroyed one of the wealthiest countries in the world for eternity. Egypt. The West supported Mohamed Morsi's democratic election in 2012, then turned a blind eye when the military staged a coup in 2013. I wonder how democracy would look like under Sisi. Their favorite military guy, their guy. Now it's amazing that the West has never tried to liberate China, Saudi Arabia or North Korea, because those countries have either nukes, oil, or enough deterrence to make military action too costly. Freedom has nothing to do with it. If I were to make a list of double standards of the West, I mean all of them, it's going to be a very long. We could make dozens of videos on different sets of hypocritical standards that govern the so-called rule-based international order, and we plan to. If you want us to explore more, whether it's international financial systems, media bias, international law, or trade policy, drop a yes, more videos on these subjects, I mean the alleged subject, whatever you want, are needed. Write that in comments and suggest your topic. Like, share and subscribe to the Clandestine narrative, because these conversations need to happen and they need to be heard. Thank you. See you next time.